Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I'm your host, Lena, and I'm so happy to be here with you today to continue our reading of Michael Jackson's autobiography, Moonwalk. Before I get into this week's episode, I just want to share a little bit. So I had the recent experience of going on a long road trip. It was about 10 hours for me to drive down to visit a friend of mine who lives south of me in the US. And this drive was something I was sort of looking forward to because it's been a while. I used to do much more road trips more frequently, especially when I lived further from my family. And so it's been a while since I've done a trip like this solo. And so I was sort of excited because I knew, okay, that means I'll have full control of the radio the entire time. So I used it as an opportunity to catch up on some MJ Cast episodes. I want to mention, actually, that there was recently an incredible episode of the MJ Cast that was all about the Destiny album from the Jacksons. Highly, highly recommend it, especially if you are, like me, a big fan of Michael's work with the Jacksons, not just his solo stuff. But I listened to that. And of course, on the way down, listened a lot to Michael. And oh my God, I was so in love and I was so crazy. And I started to think about how when I got back from my trip, I would, of course, be recording more episodes, continuing to read Moonwalk, but that also we are getting pretty close to Valentine's Day, which means that I am currently making plans to record my Valentine's Day episode. Now, this is going to be a bonus episode of Reading Michael Jackson, and it will be coming out on Valentine's Day. So if all is right in the world, this episode you're listening to now will be released February 10th with Valentine's Day this coming Saturday. So this is your heads up to make sure if you are interested in a full-on love fest, gush fest, just total unintellectual but completely absorbing love of Michael Jackson, that you tune in for that. I think it will be a lot of fun. And to be perfectly honest, between my emotions about this book and the state of the world, I am really looking forward to recording this episode. I think it will be such a blast. And I started thinking about it on the way down and like, how will I rein myself in when the entire theme of the episode is to talk about how much I love Michael Jackson. I love him so much. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that will be coming out in just a few days for you. I will forewarn you that while I have not actually recorded this episode yet, and so anything could happen, I will be making an effort to not be completely unhinged and unlistenable. But if you have any level of intolerance for intense female fans of Michael Jackson, then maybe steer clear of this coming episode. You know, this is a bonus. It's meant for fun. If it's not fun for you, don't listen. But I imagine if you are here and you are listening to me, of all people, talk about Michael every week, then you are probably someone who would be down for this. So be sure to definitely tune in. And if you think it's fun, once you listen to it, also be sure to share it with your friends in the MJ community. Finally, I'll say one more thing. So I just got back from my trip a couple of days ago, and on my way down, I split up the drive a bit because I had some work I had to do, and so I couldn't spend 10 hours in the car or more. But on the way home, I completely planned it so that I would just drive straight through. And so because of that, I decided, okay, this is the perfect time to let myself really revisit the Jackson 5 material, because obviously, like I said, I love the Jackson 5 and I especially love the Jacksons, but I don't always listen to the Jackson 5. I mean, I don't listen to them as regularly as I listen to Michael's solo work or the Jacksons' adult work or whatever. So I thought this is the perfect time. My plan was to listen to all of their studio albums. And I started. So I started with Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. And then I went on to ABC. I think I skipped third album and went to Maybe Tomorrow because I love Maybe Tomorrow. And anyway, I listened to at least 3, maybe 4 of the studio albums. And of course, I was just stunned, as I always am. Whenever I listen to the Jackson 5, I am blown away. Honestly, primarily by Michael's talent and his charisma and his vocal stylings, but also, by the Jackson 5 as a whole, as a band, as a group. I think I've said before, I don't consider myself a fan of like the Jackson family. I am very much a Michael Jackson fan. So I'm mostly a fan of Michael's music as well as the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons, because that's also Michael's music. But I'm not individually very interested in the other family members. It's nothing against them. I'm just not. So when I say that I was also aware of the talent of the Jackson 5, like I really mean that. I was genuinely just like, it was enjoyable to be reminded of how incredible this group of young men and boys really were. Absolutely stunning music, and so many amazing deep cuts. My God, we pay too much attention, and this is partly Michael's fault. We pay too much attention to that medley. I Want You Back, The Love You Save, I'll Be There. We don't remember enough of their other phenomenal music. And I was really reminded of that. But I was most importantly reminded of that when I listened to the entire Jackson 5 Live at the Forum album, as well as their TV special Going Back to Indiana. Oh my goodness. I mean, the live performance energy of the Live at the Forum album, especially from Michael Jackson, is out of this world. Like listen, I'm losing language here. No, listen, seriously, it was incredible. His talent is, I don't want to say talent because it's like beyond that. It sounded like a person as skilled as an adult Michael Jackson as a performer who happened to have a child's voice doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like, I know everyone says this, it's almost like he came out of the womb just like as talented as he would always be, which I hate saying that to some degree because I feel like it sort of discredits how incredibly hard Michael worked when it came to perfecting his own talent. I just mean that as a child performer, it is just unfathomable how good he is. And so one thing I guess I want to wrap up this longer intro with is that a reminder that I had while listening to Michael as a child performing was that Michael's entire career, I mean, we know, right? We know his entire career spanned his lifetime. But as fans of Michael Jackson, I really think we owe it to Michael, both the adult Michael as well as the little boy Michael. We owe it to him to spend time with the art and the work he created when he was so young. When we read Moonwalk and we think about the sacrifices he made as a young man, as a young boy, as a performer, to be able to give that level of output, to perform at that level. When we think about that sacrifice, I think it's important that we actively choose to also listen to that work and that music today, that we don't ignore it in favor of his adult voice and his adult albums and everything, which are, of course, incredible. But his younger stuff was incredible too, frankly. And, I genuinely feel that we do a disservice to Michael and his legacy when we don't acknowledge how incredible he was his whole life. Part of the reason, I said this, I think, during his birthday episode, but I believe part of the reason Michael sort of slowed down his output as an adult, and by that I mean, putting on an album every 5 years or only a couple of decades, I think part of why he slowed down was because he wasn't given that opportunity to slow down at all as a child. He had no breaks. So we have this really highly curated and incredible adult discography that is absolutely worth the praise we give it and that it gets. But that does not negate the unbelievable discography he has from his youth and his young adulthood. So I just, if you needed a reminder today to listen to more Jackson 5 and early Jackson's music, this is your reminder, because he deserves it. He deserves that attention and that credit. And our ears deserve it. It is so good, Anyway, that is all I'm going to say. I know that was a long intro. So with that said, let us get into Moonwalk. Okay, so as a reminder, we are currently reading chapter 3 of Moonwalk. In our last episode and section that we read, Michael was telling us about the end of their time at Motown. Basically, the how and the what and the why that came to them separating from Motown. The Jacksons wanted more creative freedom. Michael specifically did. And Michael himself petitioned to Berry Gordy to end their contract with Motown. So we are picking up now with Michael sharing that the Jacksons have moved on to Epic. So if you'd like to follow along with my reading, I am going to be reading today from pages 117 to 130. But if you want to just listen to me read as well, then I now invite you to, as always, relax, get comfortable, get cozy, and join me for this continued reading of Michael Jackson's Moonwalk. We were relieved that we had finally made our feelings clear and cut the ties that were binding us, but we were also really devastated when Jermaine decided to stay with Motown. He was Barry's son-in-law, and his situation was more complicated than ours. He thought it was more important for him to stay than to leave, and Jermaine always did as his conscience told him. So he left the group. I clearly remember the first show we did without him because it was so painful for me. Since my earliest days on the stage and even in our rehearsals in our Gary living room, Jermaine stood at my left with his bass. I depended on being next to Jermaine. And when I did that first show without him there, with no one next to me, I felt totally naked on stage for the first time in my life. So we worked harder to compensate for the loss of one of our shining stars, Jermaine. I remember that show well because we got 3 standing ovations. We worked hard. When Jermaine left the group, Marlon had a chance to take his place, and he really shone on stage. My brother Randy officially took my place as bongo player and the baby of the band. Around the time that Jermaine left, things were further complicated for us because of the fact that we were doing a stupid summer replacement TV series. It was a dumb move to agree to do that show, and I hated every minute of it. I had loved the old Jackson 5 cartoon show. I used to wake up early on Saturday mornings and say, I'm a cartoon. But I hated doing this television show because I felt it would hurt our recording career rather than help it. I think a TV series is the worst thing an artist who has a recording career can do. I kept saying, but this is going to hurt our record sales. And others said, no, it's going to help them. They were totally wrong. We had to dress in ridiculous outfits and perform stupid comedy routines to canned laughter. It was all so fake. We didn't have time to learn or master anything about television. We had to create 3 dance numbers a day, trying to meet a deadline. The Nielsen ratings controlled our lives from week to week. I'd never do it again. It's a dead-end road. What happens is partly psychological. You are in people's homes every week, and they begin to feel like they know you too well. You're doing all this silly comedy to canned laughter, and your music begins to recede into the background. When you try to get serious again and pick up your career where you left off, you can't because you're overexposed. People are thinking of you as the guys who do the silly, crazy routines. One week you're Santa Claus, the next week you're Prince Charming, another week you're a rabbit. It's crazy because you lose your identity in the business. The rocker image you had is gone. I'm not a comedian. I'm not a show host. I am a musician. That's why I've turned down offers to host the Grammy Awards and the American Music Awards. Is it really entertaining for me to get up there and crack a few weak jokes and force people to laugh because I'm Michael Jackson when I know in my heart that I'm not funny? After our TV show, I can remember doing theaters in the round where the stage didn't revolve because if they had turned it, we would have been singing to some empty seats. I learned something from that experience, and I was the one who refused to renew our contract with the network for another season. I just told my father and brothers that I thought it was a big mistake, and they understood my point of view. I had actually had a lot of misgivings about the show before we started taping, but I ended up agreeing to it to give it a try because everyone thought it would be a great experience and very good for us. The problem with TV is that everything must be crammed into a little space of time. You don't have time to perfect anything. Schedules, tight schedules, rule your life. If you're not happy with something, you just forget it and move on to the next routine. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I like things to be the best they can be. I want people to hear or watch something I've done and feel that I've given it everything I've got. I feel I owe an audience that courtesy. On the show, our sets were sloppy, the lighting was often poor, and our choreography was rushed. Somehow, the show was a big hit. There was a popular show on opposite of us, and we beat them out in the Nielsen's. CBS really wanted to keep us, but I knew that show was a mistake. As it turned out, it did hurt our record sales, and it took us a while to recover from the damage. When you know something's wrong for you, you have to make difficult decisions and trust your instincts. I rarely did TV after that. The Motown 25 special is the only show that comes to mind. Barry asked me to be on that show, and I kept trying to say no, but he finally talked me into it. I told him I wanted to do Billie Jean, even though it would be the only non-Motown song on the show, and he readily agreed. Billie Jean was #1 at the time. My brothers and I really rehearsed for the show. I choreographed our routines, so I was pretty wrapped up in those numbers, but I had a good notion of what I wanted to do with Billie Jean. I had a sense that the routine had worked itself out in my mind while I was busy with other things. I asked someone to rent or buy a black fedora, a spy hat, and the day of the show I began putting the routine together. I'll never forget that night because when I opened my eyes at the end, people were on their feet applauding. I was overwhelmed by the reaction. It felt so good. Our only break during the Motown to Epic switch was the TV show. While that was all going on, we heard that Epic had Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff working on demos for us. We were told we'd be recording in Philadelphia after our shows were all done. If there was anyone who stood to gain the most from switching labels, it was Randy, who was now part of the Five. But now that he finally was one of us, we were no longer known as the Jackson 5. Motown said that the group's name was the company's registered trademark and that we couldn't use it when we left. That was hardball, of course, so we called ourselves the Jacksons from that time on. Dad had met with the Philly guys while negotiations were going on with Epic. We'd always had great respect for the records that Gamble and Huff had overseen. Records like Backstabbers by the OJs, If You Don't Know Me By Now by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes featuring Teddy Pendergrass, and When Will I See You Again by the 3 Degrees, along with many other hits. They told Dad they'd been watching us, and they said they wouldn't mess with our singing. Dad mentioned that we were hoping to have a song or two of our own included on the new album, and they promised to give them a fair hearing. We'd gotten to talk with Kenny and Leon and their team of people, which included Leon McFadden and John Whitehead. They showed what they could do for themselves when they were making Ain't No Stopping Us Now in 1979. Dexter Wenzel was also part of this team. Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff are such pros. I actually got a chance to watch them create as they presented songs to us, and that helped my songwriting a lot. Just watching Huff play the piano while Gamble sang taught me more about the anatomy of a song than anything else. Kenny Gamble is a master melody man. He made me pay close attention to the melody because of watching him create. And I would watch too. I'd sit back there like a hawk, observing every decision, listening to every note. They'd come to us in our hotel and play a whole album's worth of music for us. That's the way we'd be introduced to the songs they had chosen for our album, aside from the 2 songs we were writing ourselves. It was an amazing thing to be present for. We had cut some demos of our songs at home during our breaks from shooting, but we decided to wait on those. We felt there was no sense putting a gun to anyone's head. We knew that Philly had a lot to offer us, so we'd save our surprise for them later. Our two songs, Blues Away and Style of Life, were two hard secrets to keep at the time because we were so proud of them. Style of Life was a jam that Tito directed, and it was in keeping with the nightclub groove that Dancing Machine got us into, but we kept it a little leaner and meaner than Motown would have cut it. Blues Away was one of my first songs, and though I don't sing it anymore, I'm not embarrassed to hear it. I couldn't have gone on in this business if I had ended up hating my own records after all that work. It's a light song about overcoming a deep depression. I was going for the Jackie Wilson Lonely Teardrops way of laughing on the outside to keep the churning inside. When we saw the cover art for the Jacksons album, the first we cut for Epic, we were surprised to see that we all looked alike. Even Tito looked skinny. I had my crown afro then, so I didn't stick out so much, I guess. Still, once we performed our new songs like Enjoy Yourself and Show You the Way to Go, people knew I was still second from the left, right out front. Randy took Tito's old spot on my far right, and Tito moved into the old place Jermaine had. It took a long time for me to feel comfortable with that, as I've mentioned, though it was through no fault of Tito's. Those two singles were fun records. Enjoy Yourself was great for dancing. It had rhythm guitar and horns that I really liked. It was also a #1 record. For my taste, I leaned a little more toward Show You the Way to Go, because it showed what good regard the Epic people had for our singing. We were all over that record. It was the best one we did. I loved the hi-hat and the strings fluttering alongside of us like bird's wings. I'm surprised that song in particular wasn't a bigger hit. Though we couldn't spell it out, we kind of hinted about our situation in a song called Living Together, which Kenny and Leon chose with us in mind. If we're going to stick together, we've got to be a family. Have yourself a real good time, but don't you know it's getting late. The strings pointed and thrusted like they did in Backstabbers, but that was a Jackson's message, even if it wasn't in the Jacksons style, yet. Gamble and Huff had written enough songs for another album, but we knew from experience that while they were doing what they did best, we were losing some of our identity. We were honored to be a part of the Philly family, but that wasn't enough for us. We were determined to do all of the things we had wanted to do for so many years. That's why we had to go back into our Encino studio and work together again as a family. Going Places, our second album from Epic, was different from our first. There were more songs with messages and not as many dance songs. We knew that the message to promote peace and let music take over was a good one, but again, it was more like the old OJ's Love Train and not really our style. Still, maybe it wasn't a bad thing that there was no big pop hit on Going Places, because it made Different Kind of Lady an obvious choice for club play. It was positioned in the middle of side 1, so there were 2 Gamble and Huff songs sandwiching it, and our song stood out like a ball of fire. There was a real band cooking, with the Philly horns giving it one exclamation point after another, just as we'd hoped. That's the feel we were trying for when we were making demos with our old friend Bobby Taylor before going to Epic. Kenny and Leon put the finishing touches on it, the icing, but on this one, we'd baked the cake ourselves. After Going Places was in the stores, Dad asked me to accompany him to a meeting with Ron Alexenberg. Ron signed us for CBS, and he really believed in us. We wanted to convince him that we were ready now to take charge of our own music. We felt that CBS had evidence of what we could do on our own, so we stated our case, explaining that we'd originally wanted Bobby Taylor to work with us. Bobby had stuck with us through all those years, and we had thought he'd be a fine producer for us. Epic wanted Gamble and Huff because they had the track record, but maybe they were the wrong jockeys or we were the wrong horses for them because we were letting them down in the sales department through no fault of our own. We had a strong work ethic that backed up everything we did. Mr. Alexenberg was certainly used to dealing with performers, although I'm sure that among his business friends, he could be just as cutting with musicians as we musicians could be when we were swapping our own stories among ourselves. But Dad and I were on the same wavelength when it came to the business side of music. people who make music and people who sell records are not natural enemies. I care as much about what I do as a classical musician, and I want what I do to reach the widest possible audience. The record people care about their artists, and they want to reach the widest market. As we sat in the CBS boardroom eating a nicely catered lunch, we told Mr. Alexenberg that Epic had done its best and it wasn't good enough. We felt we could do better, that our reputation was worth putting on the line. When we left the skyscraper, known as Black Rock, Dad and I didn't say much to each other. The ride back to our hotel was a silent one, with each of us thinking our own thoughts. There wasn't much to add to what we had already said. Our whole lives had been leading up to this single important confrontation, however civilized and above board it was. Maybe Ron Alexenberg has had reason to smile over the years when he remembers that day. Okay, so we are going to leave it there with the section that we are reading. This was a bit of a shorter section, and actually I think next week's may be as well. So it's really based on how easy it is to kind of cut and organize these different segments, since the chapters are far too long to read all in one episode and have it be reasonable at all. So with that said, I mean, this was a bit shorter, but there's still plenty, I think, to talk about. And frankly, this is a time period of the Jacksons' career, of Michael's career, that I do think is very heavily overlooked by fans. Now, granted, again, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe not by you, perhaps you do listen to this music and you have explored this time period, but I'm personally very interested in this time period, this timing of coming of age for Michael and him coming into his own as a singer, as a performer, as a songwriter, as well as a man. He's growing and changing from a boy to a man. And this is an interesting time period to me to see how he consistently voiced his beliefs, his ideals, and what his values were when it came to the music he was creating. So there's plenty of things I would like to comment on here, just looking back through this section. So we, of course, start with Michael reflecting on leaving Motown. And the biggest part of this reflection is considering how strange it was for Jermaine to no longer be a part of things. Now, I have to say that as someone who is a huge fan of the Jacksons, I would say more so than the Jackson 5, just because I love the adult sound of the Jacksons' music, I don't think about Jermaine as much, to be honest, because Jermaine really wasn't a part of the Jacksons until the Victory era, which was post-Thriller. So we have this period of time, almost 10 years, where the Jacksons are writing and producing and recording music, and they're touring, and they're doing it all without Jermaine. And again, that's a time period I really love. So it's easy for me, I think, as a fan, to kind of bypass the importance and relevance of Jermaine leaving the group. Now, again, I know that's not the case for everyone, especially people who are like OG fans from back in the 60s and 70s who were really attached to Jermaine as a part of the group. For me, coming from this like modern lens and looking back, I don't feel the absence that much, And again, I don't mean that offensively toward Jermaine. It's just more, that's the nature of the way that my fandom is positioned. So reading this part, I really felt an empathy for Michael and for Jermaine. Now, granted, I had always felt a sense of empathy for Jermaine because being the only one in the family to not be a part of the future of the group. I mean, Jermaine wasn't that old. He wasn't that much older than Michael. He was like 18 or 19 when this happened. So he was pretty young. He had gotten married, but he was a young man getting married. So he was alone really for the first time in his life. He moved out of his family's home. He was living with his wife, Barry Gordy's daughter, Hazel, and he was navigating that new family dynamic, that new relationship. And I know there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of People have said that part of why Jermaine wanted to stay at Motown instead of moving on with the family was not only the social and familial pressure of being married to Berry Gordy's daughter, but the fact that Motown sort of promised Jermaine, like, okay, well, you'll be our number one now. You'll get all this attention. You'll get all of our focus. And it's not like Jermaine did not already have a solo career at this point. He certainly did. But Michael had for sure a bigger solo career. And Michael was for sure the bigger star from the Jackson 5. And I mean, again, I wasn't present, but even looking back and listening to the singles, listening to the albums, listening to the live performances, there are so many places and ways that Michael is highlighted, both as the lead performer and lead singer, but also just like the attention from the audience. Jermaine is clearly beloved, don't get me wrong, and he clearly had, his own fandom. But there's obviously a difference, and regardless, I think it's impossible to imagine, if any of you have siblings or even are just, you're an empathetic person, it's impossible to imagine siblings that would not have some jealousy among them. I think it's only natural. It is not a fault of anyone. I can't imagine that an older brother wouldn't be sort of jealous of a younger brother who is having all of this attention and success, especially when he was the first, he was the original singer. So again, I'm not meaning to put words in his mouth or anything. I just think, let's be reasonable here. These are human beings and they're young, and, it's completely reasonable and rational that a young man would want to branch out on his own around the time he's getting married and maybe want to have his own career from that. I still feel a sense of real empathy and sadness for Jermaine because that kind of isolation, I'm not saying he didn't have a relationship with the family still, but the isolation musically after a lifetime of that connection would be really hard. And I think I have sort of underestimated at times how hard. But then there's Michael's side, which is Michael talking about for the first time in his entire life. And so again, Michael's 16 at this point, performing since he was 4 or 5. First time in his memory, he felt naked on stage. He felt scared and uncomfortable. He felt the ache for his brother who he missed so much. I mean, that's the kind of thing. Bands breaking up, friends, breaking up is painful. But this is your brother. This is your brother that you looked up to. This is the brother who held your hand when you walked home from the bus stop. This is the brother who you shared your bedroom with and who you slept with on tour and, who you had all these fun pranks and things with. This is the brother who was there in everything, and now he's suddenly gone. I feel bad for Michael. I feel bad for all of them. And the idea of having to perform for the first time without him there, as if he was just easily removable, easily replaceable. I don't know. I really don't know. My heart, I guess, just ached a little bit for both of these young men, Michael and Jermaine, but also all of the brothers, the family. That would have been really hard. And I can imagine it was a really big kind of scandal in the music industry at the time that this really pivotal band sort of broke up and they rebranded to the Jacksons, and Jermaine had his own thing, and it was over. This is, I believe, the genesis of what is often, I think, kind of laughed about in the fan community because of how it comes across. But Michael, at various award shows then throughout his 20s, saying things like, I love all of my brothers, including Jermaine. The way Michael says it, he's so earnest and funny. And I mean, the way it comes across sounds so sarcastic, doesn't it? As if he's just kind of throwing a dig at Jermaine. I don't know that it was meant that way, to be honest. I think when he said that and he would do that, I really think it was because the audience and the public likely really questioned what was going on in the dynamics of the Jackson family. And Jermaine leaving, I'm sure, felt like a real serious rift. And so Michael was always trying to remind people, no, I love my brothers, and that includes Jermaine. No, of course. But there is a part of me that wonders, Michael, were you being a little bit petty when you would do that? I've always laughed at these moments because I think everyone can kind of see that they come off a little bit strange. But I mean that in the best way. I think they're very funny, memorable moments that speak to there being some kind of discord. So even if we don't remember as time passes the specific reasonings or whatever that the Jackson 5 broke up, we don't really know all the particulars of it, I think we can still really laugh at it and sort of enjoy the humor and how it comes across in that way. But then Michael goes on to talk about something that actually I love hearing his perspective on. And this is the Jacksons TV show. And no, not the cartoon, which of course we talked about in a previous episode, but it isn't as well known. The cartoon was a very different vibe. Michael really wasn't a part of it. It was just this kind of cool, cute animated series, very much marketed toward kids and just silly, The Jacksons variety show, though, is a totally different animal. And I have seen so many clips of it. I have never watched the full episodes because I'm not actually sure if the full episodes are on YouTube or not. I know so many clips are. I mean, I've seen a ton of clips from the variety show. So I know exactly what Michael's talking about with these little skits they had to do, dressing up in costumes, performing dance numbers, acting out little scenes with laugh tracks. It's like a sitcom gone wrong, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that I can understand why Michael hated it, because Michael, as a performer, in so many ways is all about authenticity. I mean, again, he loves to put on a show from the fact that it comes from a pure place of artistic integrity. He obviously didn't feel that way, about this variety show. And I don't know if you've seen, there's so many of these clips that are just extremely popular online. What's incredible, though, is when you watch those clips, you would never know he hated it. He seems like he's having a good time. These clips contain some incredible moments of performance from Michael also. I mean, this show has some amazing performance moments. For example, Michael tap dancing with Nicholas Brothers. I mean, this is one of the only times we see Michael doing traditional tap dance. We know he can tap dance. We see him tap dance. He tap dances fairly regularly throughout his career, including some of the really obvious places, I think, are in the Black Panther dance at the end of the Black or White video. He tap dances as a part of that routine. But it's so cool to see him, dressed up in a certain way and wearing tap shoes and actually doing the tap dancing. He also sings a number of show tunes and really cool performances like Come On, Get Happy, He does a great performance of that.
The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord is waiting to take your hand. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're gonna be going to this promised land. We're heading across the river. Wash your sins away in the tide. Is our soul peaceful on the other side?
He has multiple moments of real humor with his brothers and these little skits and stuff. But to hear his hatred of it, how could it not put a different spin on the whole thing, And I want to use this actually as a chance to talk about some of Michael's philosophy in terms of how he then approached the later portions of his career that I think we can gain really serious insight into here. So Michael is a teenager and he's telling his family, this is bad. This is bad for business. This is bad for our records. This is going to change how people view us. This, to me, is one of the most brilliant aspects of Michael managing his celebrity. The fact that he was this young, but he was able to deeply relate to and understand how an audience may change the way they view them, to stop seeing them as musicians and to start seeing them kind of as these clowns for entertainment, and the damage that would do, is seriously insightful. This idea that he says, let me find the exact quote. He says of TV, "It's a dead-end road. What happens is partly psychological. You are in people's homes every week, and they begin to feel they know you too well. You're doing all this silly comedy to canned laughter, and your music begins to recede into the background. When you try to get serious again and pick up your career where you left off, you can't because you're overexposed." Michael and overexposure is one of my favorite topics because it's an area of Michael's career that I admire so much. It's an aspect of his philosophy, his mindset, his framework for approaching his career that frankly, I really wish artists today would embrace. So Michael's talking about how being on the TV puts you quite literally in a person's home. This is actually a big difference, I think, between why television stars have historically not been seen as being, as prestigious as movie stars, because television stars, psychologically, they're sitting in a box in your living room and you're watching them. Whereas you have to go to a special place, a special dark theater, you have to pay money, you have to sit there and there's a special screen designed in order to see a movie star. That is a difference. It is psychological, as he says. It's not like they are literally in your house, but the familiarity and the easy access to a television star, the easy access to anyone, right, makes them feel slightly less valuable. I mean, it's kind of like playing hard to get sort of thing, but with an entire public, where if you are so accessible to people that anywhere they turn, they see you in some form or another, they're going to lose their interest in you over time, because it's like, what's there to know? What's there to want to know? What's there to seek out? What I find interesting about this is that Michael went on to have a career in which, when he began to reframe himself as a solo artist, starting around the time of Off the Wall or after Off the Wall, and thinking about how is he going to reach the kind of global domination and reach that he wanted, he intentionally chose to no longer do interviews, to no longer do TV spots, to not show up at things. He says right here, he turned down opportunities to host awards. He made these really intentional choices in order to keep the public interested in him. Because if he became too familiar, too canned, lost the mystery, lost the aura, then he would lose their interest in his music. They wouldn't think of him in the same way musically. And I think about how there are so many people, I've seen so many conversations online. How would Michael Jackson have done in the social media era? How would Michael Jackson now, if he were still alive, use social media? I don't know, because Michael would have evolved into an adult, man, different perspective, different goals. However, I can say that I do think social media is a big reason why we do not have the level of superstardom we once did. And I think it boils down to exactly what Michael is saying right here. When there is no mystery, when you can open your phone and interact with a celebrity on Instagram like you can interact with a person you went to high school with on Instagram, the over-familiarity makes them all the less special and important. Now, I don't think demystifying celebrity is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I don't know that we should be in a world that we necessarily idolize celebrities. I don't know that that's really, truly a good thing. So I'm not suggesting that. And obviously there are still a lot of parasocial dynamics between fans and the people that they are fans of, So it's not like that's gone away. But what this has turned into, in my opinion, is now there's this over-obsession with authenticity. Because if you can see someone posting online, they're now expected to share everything online. They're expected to make statements about everything. They're expected to be available all the time, to have their photos taken. Like, the whole world has become paparazzi. Now, I don't think that means that it's harder to be a celebrity now, because at least now you can sort of fight back against what the media says about you. You can give your own image online that you have some control over. People can directly interact with you. The media has less influence negatively over how people view a celebrity, right? But here's the thing. My opinion is that it also sort of enables celebrities to overly identify with being your best friend or being just like you, whatever. And so I do think that on some level, it has made us as a public less demanding of those people we give a lot of money to and a lot of attention to. I think we have lower expectations for their talent and for their abilities. We have lower expectations of them actually using their platform and voice in the way that we would expect or want people who are, millionaires and billionaires who have the world's ear. So I think that there's a flip side of it. But without getting more into that, I mean, my point primarily is that Michael's view here and about how he approached his career basically predicts the exact world we're living in now, where celebrity culture and even music culture is heavily impacted by how relatable someone is. this is what makes me believe that, he believes so firmly in his heart he did not want to be on television. My prediction would be that Michael would not be active on social media at all. That he would probably hire a company to do very nuanced and specific kind of posts for it. I do not believe personally that he would use social media very much. And I don't know that he would enjoy. I mean, I know people say he would love like the TikTok humor and stuff. And I think it's possible he would. I think he would love seeing his fans interact with his music. I think he would enjoy aspects of all of it. But I also think he would see it kind of as what it is, which is like a huge distraction and kind of a watering down in a way of like the really exceptional talent. I mean, think about it. He's frustrated that there's not more time and effort put into television. And yet now it's like TikTok trends that take people 5 seconds to film and, make them all this money. It's just something I think he wouldn't necessarily have great respect for. But, who knows? People evolve and change, and Michael certainly would have continued to evolve and change as he got older and entered and existed in this world. So we're taking the words at the moment of like a 20-something-old and applying them to who he might be today. And that's certainly not fair. So I, like no one, can say how Michael would truly feel about any of this. The world has unfortunately changed quite drastically since Michael has died. And it's impossible to know. But I love to know that this philosophy that he had was so embedded in him at such a young age and so instinctual. And I think that has to come from a very empathetic spirit. Someone who, not just in terms of compassion, but in terms of intellect, can put themselves in the minds of another person and predict how they might feel about it and how they might feel about something. To have that insight as a child is really remarkable to me. And the fact that he was one of the only ones who did is pretty crazy. But most people think any exposure is good exposure, right? I don't think Michael felt that way. And I think this is kind of the early evidence that he didn't feel that way. I will say that he does use this section to touch a little bit upon the Motown 25 performance. I sort of wish he didn't, because I don't remember. I know he talks about it again later, but I wish, I want to comment on this, but I kind of want to save it, for a future episode. But what I will say is that I do think it's kind of interesting to read about Michael being this perfectionist who practiced everything, who was so planned and meticulous. To read him saying that the day of he was still sort of figuring out his choreography for Billie Jean is sort of fascinating. At the same time, we all know, or maybe we don't all know, but many of us know, Michael learned the moonwalk not right before Billie Jean. He had that in his back pocket for a while. And so he was saving it. And I think it is very possible someone like Michael, who just practiced dance so routinely anyway, like he said, did kind of map it out in his mind. He did sort of know and maybe have been practicing it for years without always knowing where those skills and those moves would go. And the perfect opportunity presented itself with Billie Jean and Motown 25. I'm sure we will return to that later, so I'm otherwise going to limit my comments on that, but I can't wait to talk about it. I have so many thoughts and feelings about Motown 25. It's pretty interesting, though, to go into the Jackson's first attempts at making music after Motown. And he says, I just want to point this out because I can't help it. Our only break during the Motown to Epic switch was the TV show. So he didn't have a break, is the point. Right? I mean, he worked on that TV show all the time, which, as he said, was rushed. They were coming up with new choreography, new performances, memorizing lines, performing. And that was the break? That's no break. That's no break. And with what I was starting out this episode saying about how, as fans of Michael Jackson, I think it's really important for us to routinely listen to and revisit the work of his childhood and his youth. I think that this is a perfect reminder as to why. It's like this kid had no breaks in between anything. He was touring, he was recording, he was on camera. He had no breaks. How many vacations did he ever take? And I'm pretty sure there were none that were not work related, or they were very minimal if they were. But either way, a child should not be, needing to take a vacation in order to have a moment to themselves. He's not complaining, so I shouldn't complain on his behalf, right? But I just these little lines in here are important to note. They didn't even have any break, man. That's crazy. So then he goes into this whole section talking about recording with Gamble and Huff. And I'll be honest, because I did not, at least prior to becoming a Michael Jackson fan, have great knowledge of like 70s music, especially like, soul or R&B, or I certainly didn't know what like the Philly sound was. I wasn't really familiar with Gamble and Huff, at least by name, prior to becoming a fan of Michael. So I like this section and just learning about how all these different people Michael worked with, or who he really sponged his knowledge off of, including Gamble and Huff, who he clearly has a great respect for. And he touches upon this, though. They could be incredible and talented and great at what they do, but it's just not this fit. What's interesting about that to me is that I happen to really love some of these songs that they have. I mean, he mentions them, Enjoy Yourself, which is just like such a blast of a song, and then Show You the Way to Go, which is a song that very randomly, every time I hear it, I think about this one summer that I was picking blueberries, and I just was obsessed with this song, and I was listening to that song on headphones while I picked blueberries for like an hour. And so now every time I hear Show You the Way to Go, I think about picking blueberries in the sunshine, and it's, I don't know, you can borrow that thought. It's a nice thought. But I love those songs. As he said, they got this opportunity to use their voice and express themselves and really stretch their abilities. And it's so evident. I also love Blues Away. Michael mentions this was one of his first songs. And he says, when I hear it, I'm not embarrassed. Which is like a really sweet way of saying, like, I don't think it's amazing, but I'm not embarrassed by it. Like, this was a solid effort on my part. But here's the thing. He says it's a light song about overcoming a deep depression. This is a song written by a teenager. And now, granted, it is very common for teenagers to go through depression. I think it's a very, very common occurrence when you're growing up. It's very difficult to go through adolescence. But this is once again one of these early signs. Like, Michael was struggling with a lot of stuff. And Blues Away is I actually think it's a great song. I really like listening to it, and I have it on one of my playlists. In part, I like listening to it because I know it's one of Michael's earliest self-written songs. But it also, this in some ways represents how much Michael will let us in this book. Again, he says, it's a light song about overcoming a deep depression, a way of laughing on the outside to stop the churning inside. And that's all he says about that. Why was he so deeply depressed? Why? I know we learn later, more about his insecurities as a teenager, some of the things he struggled with, but he doesn't get that deep into it. What was causing him such distress? What was making him so depressed? And it's okay. He doesn't have to. That's not his job. It's not, he did not require to reveal all of that to us. But this is an autobiography, right? It is a memoir to some degree. And he doesn't let us in on those things. And the thing about Michael, though, is that throughout his musical career, he writes songs that show deep, deep emotion. But he very rarely brought that to the surface and would talk about it. And of course he wouldn't, right? I mean, the time period, the fact that he was a boy, and then man, the fact that he was a black man specifically, there is a lot of reasons why he would not have felt he could express himself. I mean, boys and men today feel they're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to be in pain. Michael, in so many ways, was ahead of the curve when it came to even recognizing and talking about these things at all. But it does break my heart because I think I would be very curious to know about his inner world at that time. And I wish that there was a moment where he really did take some time to explain what was really going on that led to that particular song. Most of us have at some point laughed as a way of stopping the churning inside, but what provoked that in him? I would just really like to know, and I wish he had gotten a little bit more vulnerable here. I do think it's kind of funny when he's going about the cover art for the Jacksons album, and he mentions everyone looked alike, even Tito looked skinny. Michael, is that shade necessary toward Tito? Poor Tito, poor Tito. As a person myself who has never been skinny, I have never been the skinniest Jackson or anyone in a room. I feel for young Tito being called out in this way. I assume this is something that they all kind of laughed about, but Michael, come on now. But the most important part to me of this whole little reflection is him talking about his discomfort with Tito being in Jermaine's place. I really wonder how the other brothers reacted to this. Unfortunately, I don't know that we have that much evidence of them talking about it. Interestingly, I do know that around the time of Michael's death, including right before and right after, there was a TV show that the Jackson brothers were doing. It was like a reality show. And I remember seeing a clip online of them confronting Jermaine about the Motown situation. And Jermaine was crying. And I think Marlon kind of laughed and was like, what are you talking about? Like, you weren't that upset about it. And Jermaine was like, no, I was really like sad about being disconnected from you guys. It's really hard to tell what the dynamic is there. They're brothers. They're all going to have a different vibe with each other than we would expect necessarily, because we don't know. But my point is, I'm very curious, especially Michael's older brothers who saw Jermaine differently maybe than Michael, who looked up to Jermaine. I do wonder how that may have been different for them. But it is curious. I mean, this is another reflection here on how hard that was for him. And as he said, it's not Tito's fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the challenge there was. And this brings us pretty much to the end of this section. I mean, Michael is once again taking to the record executives with his father, and he's once again speaking up and saying, hey, we want more freedom. We want to start making our own music. We want to start recording our own stuff. Their music was struggling a little bit. I mean, again, he said they had some good hits there, but they also had another album that just wasn't selling that much. So this is a really pivotal time. And it seemed that Michael always had this eye on longevity and keeping going as long as possible. And I wonder if perhaps it's in part because he was so young when he started. He didn't really have any alternative to what he could imagine life being other than being a musician. So maybe that was part of it. Maybe it was what was deep inside of him that he wanted to get out in terms of musical expression and what he wanted to create. But either way, we have Michael once again arguing for the opportunity to write and produce their own music. So we're leaving it there. We're going to be kicking off into their more adult albums. The albums once Michael was over 18 and they were creating and writing and producing their own music. I'm really excited to talk about both Destiny and Triumph, and of course Off the Wall and The Wiz, and all of these pivotal times that we're about to come upon in this book. So I am really looking forward to this. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and discussion. I will certainly be back here next week to continue reading Moonwalk and discussing Michael's story of his life. But until then, remember, this weekend is Valentine's Day. I wish you all, first of all, a happy Valentine's Day. I know it's a Hallmark holiday. I get it, but I love Valentine's Day because it's about love, and anything about love makes me happy. So happy Valentine's Day. And I really do hope you tune in and enjoy the bonus Valentine's Day episode that is coming your way. So I wish you all a wonderful week and weekend, and I will talk to you all next week. Until then, take care.